At first glance, this canvas looks just a bouquet of colors. Nothing can be understood. But when seen from a distance, these colors tell a story, and behind that story lies the greatest lesson of a painter. Up close, what we see is clearly just paint, thick strokes dragged in different directions, laid down without blending. You can almost imagine the brush moving across the canvas, leaving behind rough, abstract marks. At first glance, nothing specific seems to take shape, but stepping back changes everything. Suddenly, those strokes align into the figure of a young woman resting on a couch, draped in a golden shawl with a flowing mint green dress. The scene becomes one of calm, gentle relaxation, the subject of a work titled Sweet Afternoon Repose by John Singer Sargent, one of my favorite painters. This contrast between the chaotic brushwork up close and the lifelike image from afar reveals Sargent's brilliance. His style feels loose and free, almost casual, yet the final impression is strikingly realistic, sometimes even more convincing than paintings that rely on minute, polished detail. Where did Sargent gain such boldness with this approach? To understand, we have to look at his teacher, Carolus Duran. Unlike the strict academic tradition of the 19th century, where artists sketched outlines and then carefully colored inside the lines piece by piece, Duran emphasized a different method. He taught his students to ignore outlines and instead concentrate on light, shade, and color. This meant understanding tonal values, the relative darkness or brightness of everything in view, from black at the deepest end to white at the brightest. Duran's belief was that if a painter captured these tonal relationships correctly, the painting would feel true to life. His students had to retrain their eyes, learning to see the world not as separate objects, but as patterns of value and color blending together on the canvas. Duran's students were trained to break what they saw into flat shapes of color and value, then translate those directly onto canvas. They weren't supposed to linger too long on any single part of the picture, because every mark depended on the overall balance. The painting had to be treated as a single system, a network of delicate relationships. In this way, they learned to look past objects themselves and focus instead on the effects of light and shade that define them. Ironically, this flattened way of seeing often produced paintings that felt more alive and three-dimensional than the traditional method of drawing outlines first. Duran had inherited much of this approach from Diego Velázquez, the Spanish master who, 2 centuries earlier, was already painting in a style that felt far ahead of his time. Over his career, Velázquez moved from the decorative fashions of his era toward a daring pursuit of direct reality, trying to paint the world as he perceived it. That pursuit of perception connects him with Impressionism. By the time Sargent was coming into his own, Monet and the Impressionists were reshaping art around the idea of capturing fleeting impressions of light and atmosphere. Sargent was close to Monet. They spent time together, painted together, but Sargent was rarely labeled a core impressionist. Instead, like Velázquez and Duran, he belonged to a wider current of painters who weren't confined to the movement, yet still shared its fascination with the effects of light and color. Sargent absorbed Duran's lessons with remarkable speed, and before long, he surpassed his teacher. The turning point came with his striking portrait of Duran, unveiled at the Paris Salon in 1879 when Sargent was only 23. Just look at it. The way a face is suggested by the highlights of forehead, nose, and lips, the mustache twisting upward, the hair shaped with bold strokes rather than fussed over details. Even a ring is evoked with nothing more than a dab of yellow paint. The novelist Henry James described young Sargent as displaying the uncanny spectacle of a talent with nothing left to learn. Of course, that wasn't literally true, but the comment captured the sense that Sargent's abilities, even at the very start of his career, were extraordinary. That portrait of Duran became Sargent's introduction card to high society. Commissions began pouring in, and soon he was in constant demand. Because he painted so many, Sargent is most often remembered as a portrait artist, and many argue he was the greatest portrait painter in history, capturing all the elegance and shine of the Victorian and Edwardian worlds. But portraiture wasn't the whole story. After a dazzling painting of a fashionable Parisian woman stirred controversy for being considered too provocative, Sargent left France for England. There, he began what many regard as his masterpiece: Carnation, Lily, Rose. The idea came one evening while he was boating along the Thames, where he saw paper lanterns glowing among trees and flowers. He became obsessed with capturing that fleeting glow. The challenge was that the magical light he wanted, that faint, dusky illumination, only appeared for a few minutes each summer evening. So for 2 years, Sargent worked patiently, waiting each day for that brief window of light. When the moment arrived, he would have his friend's young daughters pose in white dresses, and he painted frantically until the glow faded. Layer by layer, repainting and refining, he finally managed to pin down the atmosphere he had seen. The result is breathtaking. The painting doesn't just depict figures and lanterns, it seems to contain the very air of a summer evening. Through his mastery of values and color, Sargent created an environment you can almost breathe, with soft tones that feel suspended in the atmosphere itself. In this work, Sargent blended everything he had learned from Duran, from Velázquez, from Impressionism and Realism, and elevated it with his own natural brilliance. His loose, confident strokes might look casual up close, but at the right distance, they resolve into a vision of the world that feels truer than detail itself. You can also create professional-looking videos with built-in tools and showcase them on sleek, customizable pages. The platform makes it simple to share your work, write posts, or even sell products, all while keeping things polished and easy to manage. If you'd like to try it out, you can start with a free trial. And when you're ready to publish your site, you can get a discount on your first purchase. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. This was the story hidden behind John Singer Sargent's painting. How did you like it? Do share your thoughts in the comments. If you liked the video, please like it, and don't forget to share it with your friends.